everybody. Welcome to the FCA Locker Room, the show where we explore how faith and sports come together to transform lives on and off the field. I'm one of your hosts, Vincenzo Pepe, and today we have an awesome guest, probably my favorite guest that we've ever had, and will definitely be my favorite guest that we ever have going forward with this podcast. It's my wife, Michelle Pepe. So, Michelle, thanks for being on with us today.
Anytime. I am blessed to be here. Thank you for that spectacular introduction.
Well, Michelle, just to give a little bit of background, Michelle and I have been together for almost 12 years now, married since October of 2019. We have our little daughter who is napping in the other room, so hopefully we get this interview done before she's up.
We're on the timer, people.
Yeah, so this might be a little shorter than normal, but today is going to be an episode. We talk a lot with some athletes and coaches and some of our FCA staff, but I think for a lot of our listeners, they're may not be in that. That might not be their position, and so we wanted to kind of get a different perspective for you guys from somebody seeing it a little bit from the outside, but is also seeing a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that goes on in the ministry and maybe how the X and the O's kind of work strategically behind, but also what's being produced on and off the field. So, Michelle, before we get into it, we always ask everybody some sort of icebreaker question just to get the ball rolling.
The Vincenzo original questions. I love it.
Yes, yeah. So, and she's been hearing these for the last 12 years. So
we're still working through some of the biggest problem questions.
Yeah,
so
yeah. She's not fazed by these. All right, first one is this has been a viral question. It's all over the internet. You got in an arena, you have one gorilla and 100 men. Which one's winning?
100 full-grown men?
100 full-grown, let's say military-age men.
Okay, military age, that changes the game.
That doesn't mean that they're military fitness level.
Yeah, the average American?
We'll go average.
I think 100 might be the perfect number. I think team effort, 100 men are going to take the gorilla.
No question.
No question. 100, if they are all like, we have a plan, let's all attack the same way, 100 men.
You don't think after like the first couple people just get like thrown around this
weak ones in right away, no question. Let the gorilla tire out. Maybe we sacrifice 10. And then I'm going the 90 strong ones. Subdue that gorilla, no question.
I mean, I'm with you. 100 men. There's no way 100 men don't take down a gorilla. But this is debate. This is a big debate. And I like the way you think. Just throw the weaker ones out there, survival of the fittest.
100%.
And then
you got to keep the strong, otherwise the gorilla's going to win.
There's strategy behind it. You don't just go after them. But
I like to think the humans should win.
Yeah.
So I feel like we got to make them win.
All right, a little more of a lighthearted one. So I know you grew up, you were an athlete, team bus rides, all that type of stuff in the car, maybe for travel soccer, whatever it was. If you could only ever bring one snack with you on that bus ride or trip, whatever it was growing up, what would that one snack be and why?
Are we going to the game or from the game?
Let's do both.
Okay, to the game, let's go with watermelon.
Okay.
Fresh, hydration, natural electrolytes. Everyone likes watermelon, no question.
Yeah.
From the game, can we get like some buffalo wings? We have options.
You get whatever you want.
All right, if we can keep them warm, I'm gonna go with buffalo wings.
And that's a one snack.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have at it.
All right.
I mean, if ranch counts, then bring the ranch.
Yes, obviously. All right. Well, you guys just got a glimpse into our every normal Saturday afternoon.
What the 12 years have looked like of our marriage.
All right. So let's introduce you a little bit more to our listeners, just so they understand kind of your background, where you're coming from, things like that. So you were an athlete growing up. Tell us a little bit about your athletic experience.
Well, there were highs and lows for sure. I tried gymnastics from a very young age. I'm 5'10", so you can imagine how quickly I grew out of that sport. I also wasn't born with grace, so it made it a little difficult to look nice while I was doing things. Basketball here and there. I was tall. I could rebound. Other than that, there was absolutely no skill whatsoever that I developed. A half court shot probably had as good of a chance for me as a free throw. So, okay. And then soccer. Soccer was my bread and butter. Soccer is what I grew up playing. I grew up as a goalie. I loved it. Couldn't wait to get on the field, 3 seasons a year, which was awesome, obviously with indoor too. So that was that was the dream sport.
And so, tell us a little bit because it wasn't just you didn't just play high school. You mentioned indoor and stuff. Like what kind of teams were you on? How competitive was it? You know, just like that. And at what age was this?
So I started young. I remember everyone did sports, you know what I mean? Growing up, everybody got thrown into soccer when they were like 5 years old, whatever. Um, Maybe it was a little la-di-da back then, but it turned into very serious very quickly, probably by middle school. Obviously, fall is your modified JV varsity soccer season. Indoor soccer is awesome. That 5-on-5, way quicker, all on turf. Like the speed of that, knowing that like I could goal kick it into the other goal.
Yeah.
That was pretty awesome. That was cool. And then travel was always our spring, I guess kind of into like the beginning of summer.
Mm.
So that was travel was pretty competitive for us. Our coach, our varsity coach became our travel coach, put a league together from the 3 schools in our area. And we played, like we really played, we competed, and we were definitely, I mean, we weren't sliced bread, but we were
You're good.
close. Yeah, we were at least a loaf of bread, no question.
So, the coaches that you had, how did they impact you, whether it was positively or negatively? Like, what kind of coaches did you have, and how did you feel about them then? And looking back now, knowing what you know and the experience that you have now as an adult, how do you feel like how they impacted you?
I think most coaches were X's and O's. I think most coaches were teachers who probably could have used the stipend. Maybe they liked the sport growing up, but like they weren't getting into the nitty gritty. You weren't having life conversations with these
Mm.
people. Obviously, having been a coach's wife for almost 10 years, like I know the difference. I definitely don't feel like I had that. However, the one coach that stands out is that varsity coach. He was the one who cared, and the one who, even if it was just development of your skills in the game, like he actually cared to make you better by the end of the season.
But you wouldn't say that you necessarily had like a Christian coach that was, pouring into you guys spiritually or anything like that.
If they were Christians, I didn't know
Yeah.
about it.
That's fair. And I think that's probably, I mean, that's going to be most of our experiences, most people's experiences, especially with youth is like, you're not, hopefully that's what FC is trying to change,
Yeah,
especially,
absolutely.
especially here in the Hudson Valley. Um, so what about, just last piece on your soccer career there? Were there any memorable moments that you had growing up playing soccer that maybe shaped how you viewed competition or viewed teamwork, anything like that?
Um, I mean, I think just going back to the coach setting the tone, he this coach was not a compliment guy. Like
Mm.
I think in 5 years, I might have gotten one compliment. It was probably more like you didn't do a bad job.
Oh,
So like you take what you can get from him. But I mean, he was never a jerk, but he definitely made you realize there's always room for improvement. If that's not the definition of an application of a life lesson for like a young person, there's no way you can't improve, whether it's sports, whether it's being a better wife, whether it's being a better mom, whether it's being better at your job, whatever that looks like.
yeah.
I think that it was always constructive criticism. It was always like, if you just do this, you'd have a better result. And I think that that's game changing advice when you look back as an adult.
So he definitely had influence.
Yeah, I mean, more influence than any other coach, that's
Yeah.
for sure.
And I think we talk about it all the time with coaches, especially on this podcast, but with FCAs, the influence that they have and them not understanding or not always realizing like, hey, we have these young men, young women that are looking up to you and listening to you. And, they can apply that. Like you just said, sometimes they're applying what you're teaching them on the field to off the field type of
Yeah,
stuff, like
absolutely.
academics and things like that. And hopefully that's where we can intercede with our athletes or
Mhm.
I'm sorry, with our coaches. And you mentioned, we'll probably talk a little bit more about it, me being a coach and you seeing that firsthand and us having some of those conversations, in the car ride and things
Oh
like
yeah.
that about it wasn't just about the X's and the O's
Mhm.
as a coach.
Yeah. And not running off the field afterwards, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. If you had a question, like I would definitely, you felt comfortable enough to go to him 100%. But, I wonder to what degree, again, watching you coaching boys baseball all this time, like what a female varsity soccer coach
Mm.
for 4 or 5 years would have been like, because I've seen the positive impacts of you with young men. So I don't know that I would have gone and asked him a life question about what it means to be a good wife. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, all right, so I've shared my story or a little bit about like my FCA journey on some previous episodes, but just so kind of set the table for some of these next questions. Um, I was at a baseball training facility for a couple years prior to FCA. Had never heard of FCA, didn't even know it existed at the time. Some things came up there that we realized that just wasn't the place for me to be at that facility any longer.
Mhm.
It was taking a toll on us and on me. And so I left there and didn't really have an idea of what I was doing. This was the middle of COVID where there were no jobs and things like that. And so that was a really tough time for us. I think for me, just making sure like I wanted to provide for our family, but also I think just in general, it was just a tough time for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so, um, dozens and dozens and dozens of applications later, I finally came across FCA and had a conversation, started to learn more about the ministry. So I was in the interview process while also learning about an entirely new ministry that I had never even heard of at the
Yeah.
same time. And so I was coming back to you after talking with my hiring director at the time. I would come back to you and then I'd basically recount the entire conversation all over again. Probably miss a lot of information and details. But when we first learned about FCA and I was first kind of going through that process, what were your initial thoughts of FCA and the ministry when we kind of first started to learn about it?
Well, on a personal note, I would say every time I asked you a question, your answer made me have three more
Mm,
questions. So that definitely was a long couple months
yeah.
for sure. But
I think we still have a lot of questions sometimes because we're still so new in the area and
yeah,
still new in the ministry.
absolutely, absolutely. But I think obviously having, that foundation, having those building blocks now, like where you go with it is certainly a lot more free than what does that foundation look like. You got to lay that foundation correctly. Um, but as far as FCA, I think I mean, right off the bat, easiest vehicle I can think of in a country like America, in a world that we live in today, absolute easiest vehicle to deliver faith, God, the gospel, whatever Christian plug word you want to put right there.
Mhm.
Absolutely no better way than through sport. Because in the Northeast, where getting people to church is like taboo,
Yeah.
explain to me what family friendly, parent friendly, kid friendly vehicle you could use that would combine where they want to be, what they like, and food for their soul.
Mm.
What better way? So I think once we heard that, being Christians, maybe we weren't as far along in our faith journey as we are now, but being Christians, I look at that and I'm like, wow, how much would that have changed my teenage years?
Yeah.
So I think that was we were sold pretty early. It was like, how can we get involved in this?
Mhm. Yeah. And I think it was just I've always said probably after the second phone call with the director, I knew like I wanted to be involved with FC. I didn't know what the capacity, but I kind of remember going on the phone one of the later conversations saying, "All right, like I'm in, just like I don't know what my role is going to be, how we're going to do this." But I feel like every time we had more conversations, we learned more, you and I, it was kind of cemented like, okay, like this is right. Or
Yeah.
like this makes more sense. Or okay, we really
Yeah.
see the need for this in this area. And for those of you listening, like FCA is not just a national, it's an international organization. But
Hmm.
here in the Hudson Valley, there's never really been a true presence. There's been no staff people. And so
Yeah.
we realized okay, it was going to be a little bit of we have a support of a big organization, but still nobody knows who we are. Just like I didn't know what it was
Yeah.
when I was getting hired for the position. But when so after a couple conversations, we knew I wanted to get involved. We didn't know how it was going to be, and then I was kind of offered the position. And at that point, I had already really felt called to join the FCA
Hmm.
ministry, right, and just ministry in general. So how did that sit with you? As my wife at the time, not the person going into the ministry, but the person that would be my biggest support system.
I think when you originally said you felt called, I didn't know who I was talking to. So I guess two-part answer. Now, looking back, a year after looking back, it doesn't even have to be 5 years later, but a year later, I was like, wow, he was serious, and wow, he was right. Like, if that wasn't him being obedient and following God, I don't know what was. But when you first said that, I was like, this man is going to single-handedly take on a ministry in a dark area of the country, in a dark state in the Northeast, and in a dark area of that state. There's no Shark Tank for FCA. There's
Yeah.
no advertisement. There's no like big bang that's going to help it take off. I thought you're out of your mind.
Same.
But what's wrong with a little adventure?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I definitely believe, like I said, in that obedience, and I think that God prepares the called, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's exactly what you did. I think I had a lot of trust in you. What was the worst thing that could happen? We didn't have kids. We, I guess, lived more than comfortably considering like it's not like we had crazy bills. We had old used cars that were paid off. I wasn't worried about it. So what was the worst that can happen? And it ended up being not necessarily a gamble, but certainly a bet that paid off.
Yeah. Yeah. It was definitely, I feel like it was something where we had absolutely no idea what was going to happen once I kind of stepped into that role. Like we just knew that this was something we felt was important for the area. We felt I was supposed to be in this role, and you did. You had a lot of trust, and you gave me a lot of support, especially in the very beginning of it, just coming on staff and just raising support to just even uh, have a paycheck or have a budget for the ministry. Like that was a really tough, like 8 or 9 months, and it was discouraging. But I can say from the beginning, and even now, you've always been supportive of like, okay, like it's okay if that person says no, or it's okay if that didn't work out. Like it's gonna like something else is on the
You
horizon.
see, I love a good brainstorm.
Yeah.
So you signed up for something where we just needed to brainstorm 24/7 for the first 8 months and finding a different approach. And
Yeah.
it became, like I said, it became an adventure.
Yeah. And here we are a couple years later into the ministry, almost 4 years on staff, and we just ran an event with over 120 people.
Yeah.
Pretty humble beginnings considering the first huddle started with 2 athletes.
Yeah. And the first camp was small
Yeah.
but one brick at a time, like you're building walls.
Yeah.
And that's seeing that from a bird's eye view 5 years, 4 or 5 years later, from the time you started your support raising. Crazy to see 120 people at a Fields of Faith.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's just, I mean, God's grace and wisdom and his all-knowing plan that we just hope that we're in accordance with,
Yeah.
you know. He knew that there was no way we were going to be able to sustain the ministry if we had 100 people come to the first camp. But because 20 kids
We
came to
didn't
the
have enough
first,
Gatorade.
no, we didn't. But because, 25 kids came to the first camp, we were able to like build relationships with
Yeah.
them. And everything started small, but we've been able to build really strong relationships and really help coaches and athletes on their faith journey and help them make an impact and help them be disciples who make disciples. And now as we start to grow, we're seeing kind of that multiplication process, obviously. Um, so how do you think, we'll talk a little bit more about the impact that FCA or you feel FCA is having in the community with our coaches and athletes, but for our family specifically, how do you think FCA's impacted us and our personal faith journey?
I Obviously we were Christians prior. We believed in God. We were baptized. Um, like I think we had the beginning of a Christian marriage, just baby Christians. You know what I mean? I think that church on Sunday and being a good person all week and making sure we help people was kind of the way that we lived. I think when FCA came into the picture, I think it just took off. It
Yeah.
just skyrocketed.
I
I
think you and
think,
I at that point were like, we were really trying to dig into our faith a lot more.
yeah,
Like we were really trying to rely on God a lot
yeah,
more and try to grow our relationship with him and see like, how do we actually walk out this Christian lifestyle?
exactly, yeah. And I think jumping into FCA was absolutely perfectly timed, absolute shocker, right? That God has good timing. But FCA came in exactly when we needed a way to live
Mm,
being a Christian. And I don't know what better way to live being a Christian than you being in ministry, you being a Christian head of household, head of our marriage, head of our family. And I think that it's basically paid off in spades. I think watching you grow and watching you, I mean, 12 years is a long time.
Yeah.
We were infants when we started
I was
dating.
18.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, we were super, super young, super naive, just kind of like lived our life, not a care in the world. But seeing who you've become as a man with your faith, as a husband because of your faith, as a father because of your faith, like that's definitely the most rewarding part. And I think FCA has an absolute huge ministry as a whole, but obviously FCA being the blessing that came into your life, that's where I think the biggest impact on our family. I think that we're going to have generational impact.
Yeah.
Because we're turning a lot around.
Mm-hmm. I think, obviously 2020 was a rough year for a lot of people, and it was, there was a lot of bad things that happened. But for us, I really think like that was a pivotal year and like pointing us in a new direction, but the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
Like we really found out we realized what was important to us, the values that we wanted, the family that we wanted, the
Mm-hmm.
relationship like that you and I we were kind of newly married at this time, and we just, we were like ships passing in the night with our jobs, and we realized like, okay, like this is not sustainable and things like that. And so I think 2020 was a wake up call for us.
Mm-hmm.
And then being able to come out of it on this end with FCA was a huge blessing. I mean, and that's one of the things I've always said, like, I'm grateful that I get to pour into people spiritually with my job. Like, I get to do that for a living.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if nothing else, like FCA has almost, in a sense, like just saved our lives. Like
Yeah.
it's really truly helped us just navigate spiritual battles, because I do think the people that I have on our team in New York, in the Northeast region, and even just our leadership up to the top. I mean, Shane, we met him a couple weeks ago at a hockey game, and just such a genuine person, cares about you, wants to see, and that comes just top down.
Yeah.
And so I think our directors do that. I think people, I was at a point in my life where I felt like really hungry to know more about God and what I can be doing, and just asking questions. And so I had really great people around me who really helped model truly the ministry.
Yeah.
And then now been able to kind of copy a lot of this stuff. And I do think it's just helped me. I have to be, being a leader, but not just on the field and in work, but like it's helped me take a lot of that back home. And sometimes I'm not perfect. And there's times where you have to remind me,
You're
hey,
close.
you have to remind me like, hey, Chenzo, like this, like FCA, like, because ministry in general, but especially a sports ministry where most of the stuff happens on nights and weekends.
Yeah.
Like there are times where you have to kind of ground me.
Yeah.
And
It's definitely consuming if you let it. And I remember being warned about that. I remember on your initial interviews, like what other job is going to have a conversation with the spouse?
Yeah.
And I remember being asked, like, what are your concerns? And then being kind of warned, if you don't put your family first, not that we're not a priority, but FCA can take over, because there's always going to be opportunities. There's always going to be a night that you can have a huddle. There's always going to be something you can do where you can impact. Who are you to say no to going to impact a huddle of 10 young people?
Mm-hmm.
Why would you not take that opportunity? But when you do that 7 nights a week, things kind of get out of whack pretty quickly. But you certainly have held your priorities. I think that there's busy seasons, and then there's seasons where it's like, okay, we just absolutely knocked 3 camps out of the park. We're going to take 3 nights off.
Yeah. And I think that's where anybody in any type of ministry, if you're sold on it, that's great. But like your spouse needs to also be all in if you're married.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's the person that, like, you're not on staff with FCA, but you've been through everything that I've been
The
through.
last time I checked, I'm 100% your administrative assistant. I have proofread 9,000 emails, and I check every single Canva for spelling mistakes.
You're my mandatory volunteer.
Yes. No choice was given.
Yeah. So outside of like our faith journey kind of elevating through FCA, what's been one of the more rewarding parts of being part of the ministry, even if it was more of an indirect thing? Maybe you weren't necessarily physically involved with the thing, but just something that you see as rewarding.
I think I have a unique perspective, because starting from the ground up in the Hudson Valley, right? Watching you build FCA, watching you build via email and phone calls and relationships and funding and all of that stuff. I also got to travel every weekend for 75 years, it felt like, for travel baseball. I got to see it in action by the same person who was building it. I know that everybody in FCA is in some capacity involved in sports, but watching you work so hard to build it and then live it out was a privilege, because watching you coach and seeing the 12-year-old boys that you started with, some of them 16 going on 17 now, and watching them grow and watching them change and watching them develop, not physically, not skills wise, but who they were as a person, the respect that they showed, the demeanor changes on the field, how they reacted to a strikeout. All of those things were because FCA was brought into practice through your coaching, through your baseball coaching. These kids were, most of the kids are great kids. Most of them are from great families, like good homes and stuff. There certainly didn't have anything on the sideline where I was shocked to hear, but knowing what you were telling them, knowing that they were introduced to prayer, and knowing that they were introduced to, for let's do this for the glory of God, not for our own selfish ambition. 4 or 5 years with the same boys, like that showed. And if that's not the benefit of sports ministry, if that's not the benefit of FCA, if that's not the point of FCA, I don't know what is.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good point. And I loved being able to do that. I mean, I love those boys, but it was also kind of neat too, because like I had a mission field with them between the lines. And I always said, like, you kind of had a mission field on the sidelines with the parents.
I had the time of my life.
Yeah, there was a lot of
Jesus and Sour Patch Kids.
yeah, there was but it's just cool because thinking like, yeah, like the coach has an impact, but then like the coach's wife also has an impact on the siblings and the parents
Yeah.
and that type of stuff. Like, sure, everyone, kind of gravitates towards me because I was the coach, but like at the same time, you were always the one on the sidelines when, if there was an issue, you were kind of inserting yourself in diffusing
Yeah.
situations more than anybody should have to at times.
Well,
But
there was an instance 5 years ago, possibly 6, and the Massies will know exactly what we're talking about, where I was asked about their son's playing time, and I have no idea in
Yeah.
what world they think that I even cared enough after a game to come to you and tell you that their kids should play more. But short of that, being on the sidelines is a privilege. Making sure that I'm conducting myself not as a coach's wife, but as a Christian,
That's a good point.
was probably, I mean, it was a lot of responsibility. Not that I know how I would have acted anyway, but just making sure that building the parents up and being supportive of them. And even if it's just a pat on the back when their kid strikes out, whatever that looks like, just making sure that the culture of the sidelines, which look at today, look at today's parenting average, look at today's upbringing of children average. When you look at that and there's a concern. I definitely have a concern with how full of yourself you're raising your kids to be, full of themselves, things like that. So it's the culture of the sideline, the culture of the parents. You're a coach and you're going to have one heck of an impact on those athletes, but they still get their parents all day, every day, the rest of the week that you're not practicing or game playing.
Yeah.
Making sure that those parents maybe grow a little bit isn't the worst thing.
Yeah, absolutely. There's only so much. I mean, they're going to listen to me to some degree because I'm the coach, right? We have team meetings, but when they're seeing you live it out, because it's not in a formal setting, right? You don't have, like, you're not calling a team meeting, but you're just in an informal setting, and they're just seeing, okay, this is how coach's wife conducts herself on the sideline.
Yeah.
Like that shows a lot how I conduct myself, and then with the boys, and so it builds trust that way too.
And this is why it's important to share your Sour Patch Kids.
Yes. Yeah.
Really, really opens the relational doors.
Yes. So from your perspective, what does FCA do well in serving our communities here locally?
I think basically what we've touched on before, where FCA is a vehicle to bring faith, to bring God, to bring the gospel to people. I think that in America, right, we live in a world of convenience. Everything's right at our fingertips on our phone, or if you're hungry, you go grab at whatever restaurant if you don't want to cook dinner, whatever that looks like. I think bringing faith to people bringing God to people, bringing the good Lord Jesus Christ to people, I think they're going to be a lot more accepting. And I think holding a baseball and talking about God is going to make you a lot more successful with the average youth in
Yeah.
America than bringing them to church, telling them to probably dress a little nicer than they would in their pajamas to school with their sliders, and hearing a message that they don't necessarily feel impacts them.
Yeah.
But how can we apply God's word to being a better teammate, to having grace for yourself when you strike out 9 times in a row, whatever that looks like? I think just applying it to where they are, meet them where they are.
Yeah. I'll always remember there was an interview with Dabo Sweeney for FCA, and he said, I didn't get saved at a church, I got saved at FCA. Like FCA met me at the field.
Yeah.
And I think that's, especially with, like you said, with where we live and the culture and, just the way society kind of is, and it's just so focused on being the best and the number one and all that type of stuff. I just think you're right. You're spot on. We're going to people, and like, I think, especially in this area, it's a little tough at first. And some people are like, kind of like looking at you a little sideways, like, what's the agenda here?
Yeah.
But
God who?
yeah, but then once they kind of see like, oh, okay, these people are not forcing me to, like, they're not throwing a Bible at me.
Yeah.
They're not forcing me to go to church. They're not saying if
Yeah.
I don't do this, then whatever.
It's
Like,
more of an encouragement than a demand.
yeah,
Right. Whereas church might feel, I mean, I certainly don't think I've ever felt this way, but we were raised more or less as Christians. You feel like you have to sit up a little straighter at church. Baseball field, you're comfortable. Football field, you're comfortable. Basketball field, you're shooting hoops, you're having a conversation. It's definitely a lot more relaxed.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
I think the other portion of that is I think kids need the structure and they need the moral compass. So just to speak to the area that we're in, not every kid, not every family is going to bite on the prayer, is
Sure.
going to bite on the faith, is going to bite on the gospel messages. Whether you're super, super sly and you sneak it in there with, a well applicable Bible verse, or you're giving some grandiose speech. I think that even watching your kids for 5-6 years, I think you could see the difference in who they were.
Sure.
So even if they weren't the kids who asked for a Bible, even if they weren't the kids who went home and asked to say prayers before dinner, the way that they conducted themselves, just weaving God and morality and goodness and grace and faith into young people's lives, I think makes better, even more mature people.
Yeah. And I think it's not that, hopefully people are hearing this, but I want to just make the point clearly, like, this isn't about me doing this. Obviously, we're just using, because this is the examples that we have, right? We're living this firsthand, but this is truly like what the ministry is doing. I mean, we have an amazing volunteer running our huddle at Marist, right? And running a huddle at West Point, and like those campuses are just taking off and growing, not just in number, but spiritually. And so it's not just like, oh, I know you're not just trying to pat me on the back. But I want people to understand, like, it's not a Vincenzo. Yeah, thank you. It's not a Vincenzo ministry. It truly is the FCA ministry, and just how people understand, like you said in the very beginning, like, this is one of the most powerful vehicles that we have to share the gospel. And so when we have people that come on board with us, whether they're staff in the Hudson Valley or volunteers or whatever, or even just really amazing athlete leaders, like, we're just empowering them. This ministry is just empowering them to do God's work.
Yeah. I think the Vincenzo ministry would
have failed.
Yeah, I don't think it would be as successful.
No.
I don't know how many signups you would have had.
No, probably not.
But I will say, take you out of the equation and plug any devoted Christian adult, male, female, 20 or 75, into your position. It's a recipe for success.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the end of the day, it's if we're walking in obedience with God, like, he's gonna bless that.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked, how many times did we talk about, like, I was going into occupational ministry, and just in 2020, 2021, just a few years ago, like, I never would have thought that was the case. Like I never would have thought that I
When
would
I
be the
met you, it
person.
wasn't on the top 5
It
list
might not
of,
have even been on the top 50 at the list at
yeah.
that point, right? And
It wasn't in the projected idea or plan.
yeah. And so hopefully if somebody, if you know, if you're listening to this and maybe you're not that person right now, but maybe I wasn't that person when I
Yeah,
filled out that application. I was growing towards it and I kind of my heart wanted that, but I didn't know what it was.
yeah,
And then FCA just opened up a whole new I think if it was any other type of ministry, I don't know if I would have been all in. I don't know if it would have tugged at my heart the same
yeah.
way because obviously
Well, I
being
don't
an
know if you
athlete
would have
and
been
coach.
able to be successful at band camp.
Probably
So
not.
let's keep
You
you
have
in
to
the
be able to
sports lane.
play an instrument other than the
You
sport.
actually have to be able to understand music to
Yes.
even be in that world.
Yeah.
So
All right. So just kind of as we wrap up here, I just want if you have like a last word, some encouragement that you'd give to a spouse whose partner is thinking about stepping into ministry, or maybe is just newly into that role, whether it's FCA or not, just any type of ministry,
so to the spouse and the person jumping into ministry, or just the spouse?
just a spouse.
I would say this is probably going to be the most stressful, rewarding, and inspiring thing you've ever done in your whole life. I've seen more personal, professional, and spiritual growth in you in the last few years in ministry, FCA specifically, than I saw in the first 6 to 8 years we were together.
Yeah.
And I feel like those were the years that like maturity should have come. You really, FCA is going to open up your heart and your mind to a whole new world,
Yeah.
a whole new level. And I think being the support system for that is a crucially important job. How I can build you up, how I can fill your cup so that you can go fill others, I think is probably something that I take the most pride in as your wife. I want to be able to say he's got a full cup when he leaves the door. I don't have to worry that he's like pouring from an empty cup.
Mm. And you do. You fill me up. I will say that you're my number one support system. I mean, you've been there and you've seen me in tears basically at some of the things that maybe were not as successful as I would have hoped for them to
Yeah.
be. And then, you've always had an encouraging word. I remember there was a coaching clinic that we ran and I was expecting a way bigger number and we had very few and I was like devastated at it. And I remember coming home and like trying to like blow it off and then at one point I just kind of like cracked and we got to the root of what the issue was and I was just really disappointed in the numbers and things like that. And I remember you telling me like, yeah, you only had a handful of coaches there, but they got way more than they would have. And then look, that was 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago at this point, and one of those coaches is coming on staff with
Yeah,
us.
exactly.
And I couldn't see that, but
Yeah.
you said like there's something happened there that day, but like we didn't know what it was.
God's going to make sure that the right people are in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
The same way that you had absolutely no idea what job you were going to do.
Mm.
And look at the career, look at the lifestyle that one job search turned into.
Yeah. And even though I'm the one in the ministry and I should be the one seeing that, like it's very hard sometimes as that staff person to like be able to see the big, like be able to step out for
Yeah.
a minute. But that's why you've been such a blessing for me on the professional level with that stuff is because you can, well, even spiritually, you can talk to me about that stuff and like you can level with me and you can like you can give me a kick in the butt sometimes, or you give me a little shoulder that I need to cry on, or whatever it might be. But I think that's the important part that the spouse plays in is just like everyone always sees like the ministry person is like, oh, they're the strong leader and they don't have any faults or they don't crack and everything is according to plan. But like they don't always see what happens, at night or when we close the door at the end of the day or when
Yeah.
I come home from something or just when maybe an athlete or a coach is just really struggling with something. I come home and I share that with you, or like some of the things like that, right? Or or some of the victories that we get to be part of. Like I get to come home and I get to share that stuff with you, and like that's the blessing of being able to do
Oh,
something
yeah,
like this.
absolutely. So you're telling me there's a small chance I might become a paid volunteer.
Yeah, we'll work
Okay.
on it.
I like it.
We'll work on it. All right, last piece then. So we talked about the encouragement for the spouse. What about just encouragement to a coach or athlete that's listening to this from a parent perspective? Because now being parents for, a little almost 2 years now, we realize a lot more what's important for our kids, like what we want to see our kids grow up. And we don't want to see our kids, like we have the privilege of being able to take care of our child full time.
Yeah.
We don't have other people raising her, but like that also at some point she's gonna play sports or she's gonna be involved in something else. And so I think just what is your encouragement for a parent, perhaps, what about FCA?
I think to coaches, I'd say believe in the size of the impact that you have. I think that's probably exactly what you needed to hear at the beginning of your FCA related coaching when those two worlds collided for you. I don't think there's anyone else's job, and this is coming from a background in education with a majority of my friends in the classroom. I don't think there's another job other than coaching that has the impact that they do. I think it's absolutely the most sizable impact you can have on a young person, young adult, whether it's middle school, high school, whatever.
Mm,
I think because the kids want to be there, the kids want to be in that sport by that age. We're not talking about the 5-year-olds who want to pick flowers on the soccer field, but by varsity, by travel ball, when you're paying that amount of money to for your kid to play, like your kid wants to be there, they're bought in. That coach has so much pull and so much power and so much opportunity. And I think that the parents, I'd say buckle in. Wait till you see what a good coach, a godly coach can do for your child, and wait till you see what that can do for your family.
mm,
Because sometimes it's not the dad or the mom who's bringing the kids to church. We know one of your kids one of your athletes, the kid asked the family to start going to church.
yeah.
I don't think that's uncommon. And I think giving your kids the opportunity to grow in who they are and grow in their faith, especially as young men, right? Being that you were a boys baseball coach.
Mhm.
I think it's a whirlwind, but
Yeah. I think for parents too, it's hit me more obviously now that I'm a dad, is we want our kids to be successful. So if it's sports, right? We want them to be, be competitive. We want them to be the best that they can be more often than not.
is this why you want Addison to throw a ball at 18 months?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
absolutely. We want the best for them. And sometimes I think when we put that in the realm of or the lens of sports, we say, okay, who's the best coach that's going to be able to take my kid from throwing 70 miles an hour to 95
Yeah, of
miles an hour,
course.
or whatever it might be, or be the best goal.
Faster,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think it's way more important that you find a team, an organization, a coach, somebody that's going to be
Yeah.
pouring into you. Yeah, sure. Like the athletic piece is important, of course, but finding someone that's going to actually have a true positive life impact on
Yeah.
them, and not just, hey, good job, sport, you did a really good job today, but like somebody that, like, I want our kids when they grow up to be able to feel like, obviously I want them to come to us first with everything, but I want them to feel comfortable enough to be able to ask their coach questions or go to their coach or trust their coach and what they're saying, not just about how to hit a baseball or softball, but
Yeah.
like things about life.
You know these statistics, I'm sure, probably off the top of your head, which doesn't surprise me. But what amount of kids end up going from, say, high school sports to college and then from college to pro? I know it's a insanely small number.
Yeah, it's like less
Obviously,
than 1% of baseball players, college baseball players, get drafted, and then even a fraction of that make it to the major
yeah.
leagues.
So I get it. We live in a world where there's plenty of schools, whether it's community college or JUCOs or just a good D3, a bad D3, all the way up to, who we watch on college football Saturdays. But I think parents need to remember that sports weren't necessarily just a ride to a career.
Mm,
Not everybody is going to be the big name NBA player, the big name NFL player. What were sports encouraged 20 years ago for? Teamwork, character building, how to lose like a normal person.
yeah, that's a big one.
Okay. How to not get rewarded when you lose.
Yeah,
Stop handing out a trophy
yeah,
because they participated at 17 years old, and how much better those lessons will serve them when they're adults,
mhm.
when their boss reprimands them for the first time. Like, let them learn all the hard lessons while doing something they love, because they're that much more likely to continue it.
Yeah. I remember hearing one time that most parents want, like, their personal goals for their kids is to get a college scholarship, right? So if your kid's in youth sports,
Yeah.
it's travel sports, it's and you're paying for the lessons, you're paying for the gear, you're paying for the travel, you're
Yeah.
paying for all these things because the goal is to get a college scholarship.
You
But
can probably save that exact amount of money
and put your kid through
and
college.
pay through college.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you end up spending more money in the prep to get to
Yeah.
college, then even if they get a full ride, then you're
Yeah.
going to be spending more. So, and think about it, if as a parent, we should be thinking, all right, we're investing all these dollars into this training and all these things
Yeah.
and the gear and the equipment and all, but like, what are we also investing in our kids spiritually? What are we
Yeah.
investing in them with the values that they're going to be?
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, sport is going to end for all of us at some point. And I hope, you know, I hope that some of my players maybe make it to the best level, the highest level they possibly
Yeah.
can. But at some point, it's still going to end. And what's going to happen when they're no longer a pitcher? What's going to happen when they're no longer a goalie? What's going to
Yeah.
happen when they're no longer a shooting guard?
Yeah. And what kind of life are they going to live after that? Because is it misery because the sport is over and their whole identity was wrapped up in that? Or can they be a functioning, contributing member of society and a good family contributor, husband, wife? Can they be a better student in school? Can they be a better child to their parents? Whatever that looks like.
Definitely. Well, that about wraps it up for us. But you know, just some takeaways, and you know, Michelle and I have these conversations all the time. Usually, it's just part of what we do.
After we talk about who's going to win between the gorilla and the men.
Yes, yes, yeah, definitely the gorilla. No, not the gorilla, not the gorilla. Definitely the men. But I think it's just important for if you are a spouse of somebody going into ministry or in ministry, like just understand that we might not always tell you how much we appreciate you, but we definitely do.
Aw.
And so I do love you for that, and I love you for many things, but I love you for that because I know that I put a lot of stress on myself to do these things, but I know I also sometimes put a lot of stress on you because sometimes I just have to come home and get these feelings out or whatever it might be, or you know, leading up to events or when things aren't going well with a student or an athlete or whatever it might be, like a lot of that stress comes out on you. And so you know, we really do appreciate, we need you guys. Like if we didn't have a spouse that was supportive of us just in general, but especially with something like this where it's way bigger than us, I really truly don't know how we'd be able to just do the ministry in general, but how we'd really be able to like kind of function on a regular basis.
I am more than happy to support you. You are well worth supporting. And I think that anybody who is the spouse of somebody in ministry probably feels that the good far outweighs the stress or the proofreading.
Yeah. Or the proofreading. All right, guys. Well, thank you for listening. Hopefully you guys got some really good takeaways from this and just hearing from a different perspective than we normally do. I think it was neat for me to just kind of hear some of this stuff. I know we talk about a lot, but just hearing in a more formal capacity it was a little eye-opening to me also. So thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you again next week.